beginning with Genesis 5:28 again, showing a little bit of a link between the chapters. So let's begin reading. When Lamech had lived 182 years, he fathered a son and called his name Noah, saying, "Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief from our work and from the painful toil of our hands." Lamech lived after he fathered Noah 595 years and had other sons and daughters. Thus, all the days of Lamech were 777 years, and he died. After Noah was 500 years old, Noah fathered Shem, Ham, and Japheth. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Then the Lord said, "My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of man, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. So the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. This is God's word. Your worship response, our worship response is both tonight. Go and do otherwise and go and do likewise. Do you see it in the reading? It's important to be clear on what does God intend for the word to do to us and in us. How does it function for a church like this? And so one of the ways you can do it simply is to look at this text and say, well, it's pretty clear that the general population's in great trouble. God announces that he is going to judge them thoroughly, so we're just going to say together, we don't want any part of that at all. Because, do you know there's another judgment coming? If you know the end of the story, that judgment that we've read about, that's past. The flood is past, but the one that's coming is awaiting our world. And so it's important for us to say, we're not going to be like that population, even though we don't know exactly what's wrong yet from the reading. It's pretty vague, and God does that on purpose. We'll help you with that maybe in a little bit. But the go and do likewise part, where did you see that in the reading? Did you see it? Right? Anybody? Noah, right? Yes, you need to know that. You're a pastor, so you have to know all the answers. I get it. Yeah, good. That was good. Excellent. I love that. That's good Canadian Ontario humor right there. Excellent. So you understand you have both angles. Go and do otherwise, go and do likewise at the very end of the passage. And so for us, like basically anytime we read the Bible together, we are assessing the degree to which our faith is standing up to texts like this. That's really kind of simplistic way to look at reading the Bible. I read this text and I go, okay, it's time for me to do some soul searching. Is my faith like, can I say I really am like Noah? You could ask Michelle, you get the truer answer, but I want to at least talk to myself like that and say, yeah, okay. And the great thing about God is, let's say I find today, let's say I come up short. I know what he's like. I know he's going to be very gracious and patient with me. So all I have to do is just admit where I'm at and say, Lord, I've blown it. I need you. So there's a lot of good things we can do with this particular text. If you're wondering, if you're going to walk through this, I'm turning to this text in my scriptures. So it's Genesis chapter, at the end of 5, but we're going to be looking at 6. So if you're wondering, what about a sequence? The sequence is pretty easy to follow, I think, if you look at the beginning of chapter 6. So you have this, the multiplication of humankind is in verses 1, 2, and 4. After that is God's assessment of that population, the kind of population. God gives his assessment of it. It's not good, as we read. And then finally, verse 8, and I put verse 9 in there. It can go either way, but I decided tonight, let's put it together. And so with 8 and 9, you have the lone survivor. And so that's kind of a sequence that I can follow. I don't know whether I'll repeat that. That's not that critical, but at least you've heard it once. I want to begin with you. If you have your own scriptures at verse 1, so when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, just remember, if you take a peek back at chapter 5, just scan it quickly if you have your own Bible or scroll it, whatever device you're using. You'll notice that that chapter is filled with the lives of men and how long they lived. So you have all of the men. Now, verse 2 of chapter 5 says, male and female, he created them and he blessed them and named them and so forth. But the chapter focuses on the men. And now when we turn to chapter 6, there'll be a focus on women. So note that shift from 5 to 6. The other thing is Noah is introduced to us at the end of chapter 5, which we read, and we're going to see some of the connections with his name that are critical for understanding what's happening in chapter 6. Again, reading the Hebrew together, you'd hear some of this and go, oh yes, I see the connection because of what his name means and the sounds that are made. Back to verse 1 of chapter 6, when man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, you might get the sense of, well, this is ancient history, this is no longer relevant, and I want to say to you that your existence, the context in which you live for God, is in a population that is exactly the same. I would state probably not as severely wicked yet, but if I read the end of the story a little bit, I think we are headed in that direction according to my readings. So please remember that when you read verse 1, you are having to deal with your particular culture, the culture that is apart from Christ. So man beginning to multiply in the face of the land, and daughters were born to them. It sounds like everything is happening exactly like God commanded in Genesis 1:28. The big command at the beginning was, be fruitful and multiply and do what with the earth? Do you remember, class? Fill it. And so here it is. So verse 1 gets off to this great start. It looks like they're doing exactly what God wanted, but as you'll see in a moment, do you remember the serpent is only 3 chapters back? And he evidently is extremely effective. We saw his effectiveness, was it last night in Genesis 3? And so I just want you to remember that what you're about to read, this shows how effective the serpent and his cleverness is to attack God's world. And so you'll notice in verse 2 now, the sons of God, and unfortunately, all interpretation stalls at that point, and it is unfortunate. So let me just do this quickly. Nobody knows who they are. According to every person that I've read, and I can tell you, Greg and I were talking earlier, I don't know how many pages I've read about Genesis over the last 7 years, and so I can tell you that nobody knows who the sons of God are. I know the basic views. I can tell you one that it's not. They're not angels because God is going to be judging humanity, not angels. So this is not about heavenly beings and so forth. So let me give you my take on this. And when you read the sons of God, what you're about to see, notice that the sons of God saw, but what you're about to see is you're about to see what happens when powerful men are they're using their power for their own gains, and added to that, they're demonized. So if I were to give a modern day parallel, I usually use something like this. Michelle and I are fortunate to live in a nice little neighborhood, about a 7 or 8 minute walk from the church. We're in a cul-de-sac. We're at the end of that cul-de-sac, extremely quiet. If a gang infiltrated our town and that neighborhood, what do you think would happen to our living conditions? If a gang, are there gangs in Canada? Canada's really nice. Canadians are nice. I don't think there are any gangs. The United States has a lot of gangs. if you've ever been around that culture or seen it, Michelle and I met actually in the projects in Dallas, Texas, in the inner city, and um, what you're looking at is what would happen if powerful gang members who are demonized are now going to do some of the things that are just uh, destructive to humanity. That's really one way to understand this. There are other ways to see it, but what you're about to see is the sons of God. And when is the last time in Genesis that you have read this sequence of verbs? You ready? Look at your verse 2. The sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive. You might want to read that with me in the Hebrew. Good. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took. Saw, good, took. When's the last time you read that in Genesis? Right? So what you're seeing, even if you don't know yet what's going on, God is telling you this is a bad scene. This is so bad, saw, good, and took, that this is a repeat of the original sin which sent the entire world into a spiral downward. And so when you read this, you're only reading a few chapters, and all of a sudden your ears perk up better in Hebrew, but it's here in English pretty good, and you go, oh no, this is not going to be good again. And it's not good again. And the acceleration of this is critical. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Now, the reason why we talk about either, demonized gangs or in this case, in the ancient Near Eastern world, kings who were very powerful. So do you remember in Genesis, a little bit later in Genesis, Pharaoh decides that he can take any woman that he feels is beautiful. Do you remember in one of those great passages? And do you remember how Abram felt about the potential danger because his wife was also characterized the same way? And then go to King David. You know anything about his life where he has the power to see a beautiful woman and just simply to take her? And so there's a lot of us that believe that what you're seeing is you're seeing these powerful rulers who just go and they take whatever they want, and no one can stop them. Because all you have here is they see it, they take it as their wives, any they chose. You need to jump to verse 4. For me, I prefer to keep the sequence with respect to the theme rather than, or the thought block rather than the sequence of the narrative. Verse 4 is a parenthesis, but verse 3 is a parenthesis. Verse 4, tuck it back up with 1 and 2 because you'll notice the same action, reproduction, multiplication of humanity. In verse 4, you have the Nephilim. It was hard, I know it was hard for us to read it. It's not common. If you look at your English versions that you're carrying tonight, it's interesting that if you have the old King James, I believe even the New King James will use giants. Take a look if you have that one tonight. But then the New Living Translation, which is caught on a lot, I like it. It's really good. They fudge on this, and I think they read it giant Nephilim, and that's kind of overkill. It's redundant, but I get what they're trying to do. We only know any specifics about the Nephilim because of what happens in Numbers 13:33. So we know they are large individuals. I have seen some in my lifetime, 6'8", 6'9", 6'10"-ish men who were 300-pound plus. I've seen them up close. It's kind of frightening, but these Nephilim are on the earth in those days. How they're connected to the sons of God, I don't know. In some sense, I don't care. I just know that God says, I want you to know they're there. And they're there because of their size. So you can imagine that they're contributing to this lifestyle somehow. And the Nephilim are on the earth in those days, but then also afterwards. So if you're kind of aggressive Bible students, if you're nerdy and you really like to dig into this stuff, the fact that they show up afterward, after the flood in Numbers, is interesting. Because that eliminates, right, Josiah, that's going to leave out some potential, who are they? They appear again after the flood, which tells me they can only be part of what family? Kind of seems that way, right? So kind of interesting what's happening here. They're also afterwards. And then you'll notice the restatement, just so that we don't forget what's happening. This is how the population on earth is multiplying. Verse 4 continues, when the sons of God came into the daughters of man and they bore children to them. And then again, just to let you know what's going on, these were mighty men who were of old. So they're ancient heroes. In this case, some of the translations I think are fine with that term. These are the strong ones. And in the Old Testament, normally their strength was put to use how? How do you imagine put to use? You really want the strongest men possible if you're going to war, and evidently they went to war all the time. So you have, if you read this text throughout the Old Testament, this particular term, these were the mighty men who were of old. I can think of one. Do you know the name Nimrod? You probably don't call your kid that unless they're really kind of bad. Nimrod, that mighty hunter. He's one of those. You could see it there. These were the mighty men who were of old. And then, of course, one last description, just so you know what's happening. These men are all, the Hebrew reads, they're men of name. Actually, that's misquoted, men of the name. Which means, if I go in some of your circles and I say, hey, do you know Jamie Snow? Oh, yeah, I know Jamie. Jamie's got a reputation. He got a good reputation in this. That's what these men were. These were men who had a reputation all over. Again, I just want to ask you, what do you think the reputation might have been? That's all. You want to think it through a little bit because you want to get a sense of what's happening in the culture, what's happening in the world around you. If I asked you, who are the famous ones? Who are the famous people right now? Give me some famous Canadians. I used to know some pretty good. I read Maclean's magazine cover to cover for 12 years, just trying to figure out, what is all this? And give me some famous ones. Who are the famous Canadians? Give me the worst ones you can think of. Apart from your leader. Don't give me your leader. Don't talk bad about your leader. I have heard so many things about, and don't talk about our leader. Let's not go there. Yeah, oh yeah, but that's a good thing. I need some bad people. Shelley, what the world? I know you're good-hearted, but that's not helping the sermon at all. Not at all. Anyway, we can't keep doing this. If she's going to do that, we can't do that. Okay, yeah, there you go. But just think about who's famous. And usually the famous people, at least in the States now, I'm sure it's like this in Canada. The folks who have all the pull, all the clout, all the power, they're folks with means. Is that big? Do you know some poor people in Canada that are really famous and they have a lot of pull? Do you know of any? I don't know of any. I haven't heard of any. I haven't crossed the border into our news. So you just want to get a sense before you leave 1, 2, and 4. I just want you to remember you're a part of the same humanity. Humanity has not changed. Two things make the Bible relevant. You know this. The character of God and the character of the human heart. They don't change. That's why the Bible's relevant. That's why an ancient book continues to speak to us, because those two things never change. So here's your humanity being portrayed as this type of person. And the only specifics you get is these are very powerful people. And, oh, by the way, they see things, they say those things are beautiful to them, and they take them. I might ask you, if you were a father and you had a beautiful daughter, how would you feel if one of these powerful men just come along and just take your daughter and that's it, and you can't do a blessed thing about it? That would be an issue. But anyway, you have this sense of the multiplication of humanity taking place. That's probably enough of all that. But I can tell you very quickly, God says, can I tell you my assessment of what's happening? So in verse 3, go back a verse, then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for his flesh. Now again, we're only chapter 6 in. If you go back to the early part of Genesis, you know how important the Spirit of God was. The Spirit of God is what puts life into everything. And so here we are told again that God says, and I know it's kind of difficult in the translation, but God says, I am not going to be able to extend the life of humanity much longer. Now, if you go back to chapter 5 and look at some of the lifespans, tell me how they compare to 120 years. What do you see? Just do it quickly. What do you see in the comparison between the years they lived in chapter 5 and now 120 years? Greater or much greater? 120 is much less than what you're reading in 5. Is that what you're saying? I don't want to put words in your mouth. So when you compare these, so what you're reading in verse 3 is God saying, I am going to say that from this announcement until the flood, this is how long I'm going to give humanity to live. So we know it's not 120 years only, because right after this, you're going to see people living longer. So that doesn't add up literally. It doesn't add up literally. And that's not what's happening here in the reading either. So you have God saying, it's because humankind, is flesh equal to mortal. That's all you have to see. Or you could dig in a little bit to this term and realize that when God uses this particular term for flesh, he's talking about humanity at its weakest. And so what you're seeing again is an entire humanity being deceived by a serpent. The serpent is doing a fine job at its assignment. Because now God says, I am going to drastically limit the lifespan of humankind, and the flood is coming very soon in the narrative. Go to verse 5 with me. 3, 5, 6, and 7 all talk about God's assessment. In 5. Now, I'm trying to make connections that for all of my life I've tried to see in the Old Testament. The story is masterfully created. Inspiration doesn't only work at the level of content, it worked at the level of structure, not just content. This is fascinating how God orchestrates this narrative all throughout. Can I give you one fun one? When you start reading the Old Testament story and you just read on, Israel breaks the 10 Commandments one after another in order until they land in exile after they've broken all 10. And it is fascinating to read the story with that lens. Israel just is caught breaking commandment 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and all of Israel knows that by the 10th commandment being broken, of course they know why they're in exile. God told them this is what's going to happen if this is what you do, and they did it. Here, though, early in Genesis, let's test your memory from the early portrayal of creation. Whenever God finish it, and God saw that it was good. How many times does he say it? Do you remember? How many did you say? And then in the 6th one, and you're a missionary, you have to know all these answers too, not just Josiah, but you do. Trevor does as well. He was a pastor, now he's a musician. So you guys all have to know all of this every time, right? So you're exactly right. When you get to the 6th one, he saw it's very good. Now take a look at your text, and what does he see? Do you see that? So it's very interesting how God's sight is drastically changing now. And God saw that it was good. It saw it was good over and over again because God created the good. And now when he looks at what humankind has created, look at what he sees. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. And let's stop there and let's talk about wickedness for a moment. I almost blew through that today. I was reading it again, and I thought, no, everybody knows that. But a lot of church words everybody knows, but we don't really know. There's a lot of those. Wickedness. Ra'ah, a strong word that talks about destruction. You might like the term calamity. In the States, there was a famous, did anybody remember Calamity Jane? You have to be really old. You would know. Your age, no doubt Greg would know because he's way older than me. And Calamity Jane. Calamity. I thought, of all the terms you could use, I kind of like that one. Wickedness. How about this one? Evil. Now, this is interesting. Trevor, I am older, but I do read up a lot and try to stay with what's happening. And you know what's interesting to me? That the media still uses that term at times. We still talk about evil in this world when there's supposedly no absolutes. It's fascinating to me. I think it's very inconsistent. I'd like to say that it only happens in Ontario, but I know that's not true. Very, very interesting that our society still labels certain things evil. Do you know which crimes are labeled that way? Do you folks know? Can you guess? No, not usually murder. Not all murders, let's put it that way. Shirley, that's twice now you've been off. So I don't know what's happened in 21 or 2 years. Either you're sliding backwards or something's going on. No, don't go. Send Steve in. You go, have Steve come in. Stephen can come in. Do you know what crimes? Crimes against children. When you read crimes against children, the media will still use the term. So even though they don't believe in this stuff, they label it that way with certain crimes. I just want you to notice that what God sees when you read wickedness of man, if you can't get an image of that, you have to get an image of that, or else this is kind of watered down. So you might want to get a sense of what is the most evil thing that you have either, hopefully not experienced, oh my goodness, but you've read about it, heard about it, seen it on the news or something, but get something in your mind so that you can understand what God sees. And you have to see things that are destroying human life. And, the variety is endless, unfortunately. It's just destructive to the human soul, and God sees this. And then, boy, if you think, well, is this bad? Look at the reading. How bad is it? And that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Now, it's a long phrase, and it's a long phrase in Hebrew too, but I just want you to think that early on in Genesis, you've already heard the term. When God starts to shape creation, that's the word the Hebrew term is using, and you're now seeing it again and that every intention, it is this aspect of a human being starting to shape his or her plans in their mind. That every intention of the thoughts of his heart, which is that old Hebrew way of talking about your whole being. Your ability to feel, which they say hits the mind first, by the way. We've talked about this a lot in the past, but just understand that as a human being, you feel first, and then your mind, we're told by the experts, your mind has to catch up with your emotions, which ought to explain a lot of you and me how we act. So just think about that. Your emotions go first. Your mind must play catch up, and then finally you make decisions based upon how your emotions and your mind kind of deal with your whole being does this all the time, multiple times a day. The point here is that every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. I mean, this is not just a once in a life. This is habitual, consistent conjuring up of how can I. But watch how difficult. Look how subtle this is. The best and brightest minds on the planet are working day and night to erase any sense of sin and death. They don't label the first one. They label the second one. The physicians in our church tell me that, and I've been handed articles, journal articles that are, what do you call it when they're refereed? These are legitimate articles where physicians are putting out there a time frame when death will be defeated. So there's conversation in the medical world about by the year whatever, death will be no more. Now, I know how it is in Maine. If it hits in, let's say 2030, it won't get to Maine for another 50 years. So any of my relatives are going to be dead before it gets there. That's just a joke about Maine. New Brunswick, Canada might have been a little like that, maybe, but not Ontario. I mean, Ontario's progressive, so they'll get it. They'll get it way before Maine will get it. But listen to what they're saying. The best and brightest minds. So if I ask you, how are the best and brightest minds solving the problems of all creation? What are they doing? What's their solutions? What are you reading or hearing? How are they doing it? Come on, talk to me. Go ahead. Who's doing it? Yeah, go again. Yeah, no doubt they've got a lot of theories. But what are they saying that we should be doing to fix us? Where are my three, Curly, Larry, and Mo, that should have all the answers here? Come on, guys. The clock is ticking every night. How about, and I can't wait. I appreciate that. I mean, I see a PA about my diabetes. It just sort of snuck up on me out of the blue. It's like, diabetes? From how? How? And gene therapy, hey, think of all of the remedies that we're hearing about now that is cutting edge, eradicating all kinds of diseases. Close to me, of course, Alzheimer's. My dad died of Alzheimer's back in the end of 2019, and I just read in the Wall Street Journal the other day that they're working on and there's promise here that they're going to get rid of it. So it's like, great. Hopefully before it hits me. I feel like sometimes I'm missing some words and like, oh no, what's going on? But the best and brightest minds are doing everything they can, and so they can use technology for sure. And I want to applaud that and say, keep doing it. And when I say the best and brightest minds, I mean that. They are doing incredible things. The big one that they continue to push is if we could just educate better. And so they just feel like if you can just keep educating better, it's going to change society for the better. And I'm all about education, man. I love education. So in a way, I just want you to see that when you're reading in Genesis 6, this is only evil continually. It's really hard for me to see this, except for just one big issue. The best and brightest minds usually on the planet are trying to fix all this stuff without God at all. They're just leaving the Creator out. So you just have to think about what's going on in your world. When you see verse 5, you go, wow, is it that bad? Well, I can tell you in pockets it is. It's that bad in pockets. But I snuck in a few minutes ago, it's not that bad everywhere yet. But I've read the end of the book here. It's not that many pages to the end. It doesn't look good at the end. There's one place, do you remember this, where God said, if I didn't shorten the time, even the elect would be deceived. It's like, whoa, okay, that's strong language, because I know about election a little bit. Even the elect, he said, would be deceived if I didn't cut short the time. What does that tell you? Let's go back a minute. What does that tell you about the effectiveness of the serpent? And I didn't intend, by the way, when you and I talked the other night, I didn't intend to make any of these connections like this. But it is interesting that all of a sudden you're seeing an incredibly effective device to send an entire world towards, and I mean hurtling towards judgment. Now, let's stop for a second and talk about this. See, evidently, the evangelical church continues to move in the direction of we like God of love, but not God of judgment. That's where the evangelical church is headed. It's in the air you breathe in Canada. I know it's crossing borders. I know that. Just like this, the smoke from the forest fires, kind of down touching us too. All along that strip is with us too, the haze. So you have this incredible sense of, oh my goodness, yeah, I can't have any part to play in this at all. God sees this. It's only evil continually. God is saying, you're wrecking my world. If the gang members came into my little neighborhood, that would be one of the things that would be on my mind. You are ruining my world. If you touch my motorcycle, I have guns. We're Americans. We have guns. I grew up in Maine. I've always had a gun under my bed, whether you like it or not. I'm sorry. That's just the way it is. But I can tell you, I'd have some words with gang members if they touched my motorcycle. It would be worse if they tried to get her. That would be worse. I wouldn't care about the consequences at that point. So when you get to this, before you get to 6, you got to realize how much is at stake for God. God says, you're killing my world. I created this world good, and now all I see is evil. It's sad. You go to 6, it's no wonder, and the Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Now, you ready for the connection again? When did you see pain in Genesis 3? Give me the first time you saw pain. We talked about it just for a bit. The first, yes, the first was the curse announced on the woman, and she experiences pain in giving birth. When was the second time you saw pain? Do you remember the second one? I gave you, you got the first one, so you get an A. My three helpers are failing me. It's like they're looking at me like I got two heads. It's in the Bible, Tim. Come on. No. That's it for him. He's done. You and Shelly can go out, find replacements out there, or subs or whatever. I mean, what was the second one? Well, the rules are you can't answer my question with a question. So just give me the statement. Just do it as a statement. Yes. Oh, yes, Elizabeth. Oh, I love her. She's legally belongs to us anyway, so hey, this is great. Can you imagine that you hear about the pain that's the result of the curse, and now who's experiencing the pain? Yeah, God himself. I mean, you probably should take that in just for a second. And this is hurting God. So you good theologians in here, when you talk about the doctrine of God being able to feel or not feel, let's let the text read and say, yeah, he feels. He's not controlled by his feelings like a human being, but he does feel, unless I want to reread this, and I don't care to reread it like that or rework it. The Lord regretted, if you've got the King James, maybe in another version, what did he do? That's a hard one. So, and listen, I love these versions, and I try to figure out what's giving them their readings, but you don't want to see he repented like humans do, because that's not the way God operates. So he kind of operates like this. Since I am unchangeable, I always regret sin. I'm trying to help you. I'm not saying this solves everything, but it's enough for me. Because he's unchangeable, he always regrets sin. And, oh, by the way, because he's unchangeable, he will always change his plans whenever his people decide to keep sinning. That's the unchangeableness of God. So you don't want to read this and go, what is happening to God? He changes his mind? No. This is always the way that our God has operated. All of the covenants, any of the conditional covenant, any of the elements, the conditional elements in the unconditional, quote, covenants, is that better, I guess? All of those smack God saying, I'm always going to work this way. Which is why I told you at the beginning, it's important that we worship responding to this text, either going to otherwise or going to likewise, because God says, this is the way I operate with sinners who are blatant in their sin. So all of the pain he's experiencing, you go to verse 7, so the Lord said, I will blot out man, whom I have created from the face of the land. Greg and I spent some great time this morning. Trying to catch up for 40 years is like, the time went by like crazy, except he puts me under a tree that's got all kinds of sap, and I sit down on an old picnic bench, and he doesn't say anything to me until at the end of the conversation. Oh, by the way, I'm sorry about where we sat. Now, thanks for telling me now. I've got these great jeans on. I'm going to send my expense account to Shelly with nasty little notes about my jeans that got a sap spot about that big. I don't know how to get this out, but we read about it. And I just want you to look at this text so that you see what I'm going to try to do to that spot, God promised he was going to do to all of the human race. And when you read blot, and this Hebrew is fine here, when you read, I will blot out man whom I created from the face of the land, man and animals and creeping things and birds of the heavens, because I'm sorry that I made them. When you read that, he will erase them so that they are no longer seen. It's exactly what I need to do with these jeans. It's exactly what God is going to do. That's his promise. There's no way. You don't even want to try to lighten this up. Don't do it. Don't do it. One of the scariest things today that I'm reading about theologians doing with the Bible is if hell is listed as, let's say, flames and fire forever, theologians are now saying, well, it can't be that bad. It must be something less because it's figurative. What if I flipped that and said, this is God's best way to communicate the horrors of being without Him for eternity? What if the literature can't convey how bad it is and it's actually worse then? I go in that direction. I am not going to diminish the judgment of God because I can't imagine how a holy God extracts holy justice. I have no idea, but I can tell you this, I don't want anything to do with it. I like what's coming in verse 8. This is the lone survivor. You all know this. But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. I don't know what your versions are doing with it. Do some of you read grace? Noah found grace, something like that. Do you see that? Do you see that? That's fine. Just hear the subtlety of what the Hebrew is doing. Noah, the name Noah, has a certain amount of consonants. And favor is the same consonants flipped in order. So when you're reading it, it's like, oh, that's a nice little device. A little wordplay, again, on Noah. Another one, if you're interested in how these read, when you read the Lord regretted and it grieved him, we've already read that together at the end of chapter 5 with the description of Noah. We've already read the same Hebrew term. So God is just reminding us what He's doing in this little section. These little bookends, these inclusios that we see, they're helpful. And Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord, and nowhere does God tell you how He found it. He doesn't say it. Things get cloudy in verse 9. Take a look. That's why I sort of tuck it in there. It can go either way. These are the generations of Noah. We know there's a new section here. And now you have Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. 3 things about this very quickly. You ready? He did find favor, and he is unique. He's the only one in this entire population that, let's start at the bottom and work. He walks with God. When did you see that earlier in Genesis? Do you remember the guy's name? So here it is again. As if God is saying, you want to know how to receive life plus from me, you got to walk with me. You have to be someone who likes the direction I'm going, God says, and you must be able to walk alongside of me and enjoy it. That's what the walking with God is. And the 2 character traits, let's keep moving up. Blameless, tamim, complete, whole. Perfect. Yikes. But in the Old Testament, it's never one who is sinless. It's someone who, against which God has no current, accurate, unresolved issues. There's no such thing as sinlessness in the Old Testament characters. We could talk that through. But Noah is special. He's blameless. And finally, the first one, he's righteous. Now, quickly, we talked about how do these things end. For me, I followed Jesus' hermeneutic from Luke 24. He says, you know all those stories back there, they all point to me. How? Well, it's interesting. On the cross, God made a decision. Instead of blotting out humanity, who does He blot out, class? Of course. Do you see how this reads? The judgment that God announced on humanity, it falls on His Son. It's the beauty of the gospel. You read a story like this, it's all about judgment until you get to verse 8. And there's the great news. And if I ask you, according to an Old Testament person, how does Noah find favor? He finds it by faith. It's that simple. He finds favor. You don't earn favor, you find favor. You receive favor. That's a gift from God. We know that because of what Hebrews 11 says about Noah. And so here's Noah pointing the way for us. So that's to go and do likewise with Noah. I want to be in his camp. I have to be in his camp by faith in Christ. You do too. Which means I have to take a step back and say, can you look at my life and see my walking with God, my blamelessness, my righteousness in purely Old Testament senses? Trusting Christ to make me different from the culture. Because any of my parishioners know this. I don't want any surprises at the judgment. They all know this. They know that if their lifestyle does not match their profession of faith, their profession of faith is bogus. The Bible's clear about this. This is not about I made a profession of faith when I was 10. I was baptized at 10. It's not about that. It's about, am I walking with God by faith? That's what we need to do tonight. We leave that society aside, separate ourselves from the society, ask to go and do otherwise, to go and do likewise. Just like Noah, trusting Christ and walking as if we are. Thank you.